Well, here we are, folks. It's Lindsey Huddleston back in the building with SPS Sports Psychology Solutions for another Mental Toughness Show with my great co-host and SPS intern, Mr. Terry McCord. And we wouldn't be coming to you without the help of Coach Orlando Watkins, holding it down in the best city in the world. That's my hometown, Detroit, Michigan, right now, doing a great job. We call him Houston because we're the astronauts out here in the world, and he's keeping us connected. But, Terry, we got some great things to talk about, in part to the great ideas you came up with acting as a producer on this show to come up with some topics regarding the social justice movement that's going on, getting back to football, and basically, kind of touch on the conversation we were all having offline about, sports starting back up. And Terry, I have to say this, and this can kind of go into the topics that you and I talked about yesterday. I've been torn, man. I have really been torn. It's kind of like it's dinner time and you can go to your favorite restaurant, but there's nothing on the menu you really have a desire to eat. And I know that sounds crazy and it may sound like you're spoiled or privileged or out of touch, but right now, man, when I see these football highlights, these players out there, these coaching staffs with their masks and their uniforms looking all sweet, that's good. But then I see empty stands, and it's a reminder of where we are. Now, on a more personal note, as a parent, who has a child that's being homeschooled through, screen to screen, I understand that. But it seems, in my view, and I'll step out there and use some journalistic, leverage and say, I'll take a hard stance. I think that we're getting back to sports too soon. I think there are too many other factors that we don't know about. And although we may have a 6-week high school football season, the hope is that it can happen and take place. But I just really hope, Terry, that getting back to football right now isn't too soon. That will lead to further setbacks as it relates to people's health and a lot of other social issues. So that's where I'm standing right now today on that. What do you think?
I think, just to break it down as simple as can be, I think we're faced with a dilemma where we're faced with self-interest and what's correct. Like, what do we need to do? You know what I'm saying? So, like, the right thing to do and self-interest. Sometimes people's self-interest doesn't always line up with the right thing to do is. So we see social injustice. A lot of people may have to take that step back, away from what they feel is what's going on, and them acknowledging, like, I don't know, what needs to be known. I need to do some more educating, and I need to see, what's left that I can do. And I feel like that's a dilemma. And now we have another dilemma with sports. We're all fans of sports. We really miss them. We want them to come back, and athletes want to play, but then we're forced to think about, is it the right time to play? Do we have the right resources? Like we talked about off the air, do we have the right resources to play? So I think it's a lot of thinking in between, what I want as a person and what society needs right now. So I think it's really key that we really think about that and see what we can do that's going to benefit others and not only ourselves.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's tough because I go on my timeline. I know a lot of people, for example, me being a proud native Detroiter, being here in Lansing for some time, Lansing has confirmed that they will not be playing fall sports, meaning there won't be any football. There's a lot of fallout on that. But again, man, I just think that just because we're fed up with the COVID-19, and just because we're kind of like tired of the pandemic, that doesn't mean it's still safe for us to interact like that. Now, for example, I stay close to Michigan State athletics. I was just informed that just recently, I believe they're probably about, I can get the exact number about how many people that tested positive for COVID, but you still have athletes testing positive for COVID. Now, I guess what really bothers me, Terry, is from a social justice standpoint, from a moral standpoint, it seems that these big programs, the Big Ten programs, these Division I colleges, it's okay for them to push forward, because there's so much money involved. And then we kind of pick and choose how we want to deal with it. But then on the high school level, it seems that we're so caught up in the emotional part and not looking at the practical part. Now, these kids can come play 6 weeks, man, and I want to be wrong, Terry. I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. I want it to be that, yeah, you were a little bit too conservative on your outlook on that. But what about the potential long-term risks that we don't know about? You hear these isolated incidents of people having COVID and having some serious respiratory issues, and you wonder what the lingering long-term effect is. The last thing I'll say about that, I want to get your perspective, is it kind of likens when you look at an old movie, like a show that used to come on, that still comes on, called Mad Men. and this was during the
Right.
50s and the 60s, and this was when smoking was introduced. So you had people smoking in public areas. You had people just smoking like casually, any and everywhere they were, because they
Right.
did not know the negative impact of that. Now I don't know. Some may argue it's not a fair comparison. Some may say it's right on, but we are right here now with COVID, and we're just totally blowing past it, not knowing what the long-term effects could be. Last thing, what if all these guys and girls playing sports right now, what if that can only negatively impact their system as it relates to COVID and lead to something that's possibly irreparable or just we can't figure out? Now, somebody may say, well, what are we supposed to do? I just don't feel that just because it's football season means that we got to play football. So that's my thought. And I've been wrestling with that for a long time.
Right. And I think that's something I've been thinking about as well. I think a lot of times we think of ways to reintroduce stuff, get back to that norm, like the normality of different things, of getting back to how it used to be. But a lot of times we don't want to face the repercussions of, a pandemic that we didn't take so serious at first. But now, these are the backlash of things that we didn't take serious at first. So the backlash may be no football, no, not being able to gather, not being able to graduate. As sad as those things may sound, those are consequences of what happens when we don't follow, directions that like the governor was giving us. So I think those are, you know, as sad as it may seem, but we deserve those things. But I think I'm to the point where I'm like, how do we start to introduce those things back into it? I think that's a big question that I've been hearing a lot around the community, like Lansing. So like, are we always going to be, social distancing for the rest of the year? What about next year? So I think it's more of like hoping to get back to being normal, but also wanting to do it as safe as possible. And I think I'm to the point where it's like now gyms are reopening. I've been going to work out and they're taking it very serious, mask on at all times, or you're asked to leave. So I think we're getting to the point where it's like we're reintroducing different aspects of, gathering together. But I think, just like Whitmer said, the more and the better we get, the more like numbers that decrease, according to their numbers, or as she sees change happening, she's going to reintroduce that stuff. But I think, with football season being here, I think a lot of people want to rush the process because, football, everyone loves football. It's the American sport, and it's, a sport that brings in a ton of money. But I don't think because we have so much backlash and not taking it serious back in February, we're not able to speed up that process. And I do believe that if we do risk things, it could have another kind of repercussions stage of where, we get a ton of backlash and we're not able to really recover as fast as we think we can.
Yeah, this has been tough. We kind of talked about it last week and, talk about the idea of as an athlete, when you're preparing and you got the news that you probably wouldn't play, so you had a mental shift. Then you got the news that you would. And at that point, it's such a back and forth, up and down. You can only, send your heart out to the athletes, and that would have been you a year ago based on where
Right.
you were. And I don't know, man. I love sports, man, but I just can't get excited about it. And I feel like I'm in the minority who feels that way, and that's okay. And I don't want to take the passion away from any athlete, no matter what level they're on, who's trying to prepare and play. But I just can't get past the fact that, from what I understand about this virus, we have to be very careful. And if it can work out where they can be, fanless games and these guys can come in and play, I guess the question comes down to how many is too many new cases of
Yeah.
because like I said, even with the testing that's going on at Michigan State, you hear about athletes testing positive. Well, somebody may say, well, what athlete, what sport? Well, they may minimize the sport and say, oh, well, that's not basketball. That's not football. Of course, we don't have to worry. But then I guess it's the moral dilemma I come up with, TJ, because it's like, well, who's more important than the other? Then as a black man, we talk about social justice in America, you can't get help but to get back to saying, okay, well, this is a form of discrimination because if it was one particular group, you wouldn't do it, but because it is this group, you're doing it. Is it because college football is predominantly African-American males? They're considered more expendable and there's less of a emotional connection to these guys? What if it was the reverse? What if college
Right.
football was played by predominantly white males, and meaning the idea that predominantly white males could take this virus if they contract it and take it back to their family and friends and impact many others? I mean, those are things that I don't think people have the courage to come up and talk about, but those are things I wrestle with. You know, what would be my answer? You know, someone can say, well, what do you plan on doing? We can go with what's going on, but I think the one thing that's never really being discussed is how many is too many and when do we say stop? So I guess my question to you, Terry, is what do you think will be the cutoff, if you will, to say that, okay, we're playing this 6-game football season in high school in the state of Michigan. However, we're testing and we're still getting positive COVID test results. Well, at what point do you say, well, it's too much to risk? And I wonder what you think, people are going to be saying about that.
Right. So I think just the first off, I agree with the saying of, one person is too many. But I do realize that this is a pandemic where, that one person could be in the matter of seconds. But I think if they were able to find a way to make sure that athletes and keep them accountable for being safe. And I think that's a hard thing because you bring these athletes from their homes, to the high school football field. So instead of college where they're going to their dorms, and they're all in the same area, high school, I'm going back to my crib and, Henry's going to his house and Damon's going to his house. Once it gets to that time where school is out and practice is out, coaches don't really have, you know, the resources and the ability to be like, yo, like TJ, you at home? Like, are you at home, Damon? Are you at home, Henrik? Different people, are they at home? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? So I think if there's a way, which is going to be tough, and I don't think can be done, I think it's really the sense of, do athletes really care that much to play, to follow and do what they need to do to be able to be safe? Because, it's hard. It's like how we would think today. Do I trust that, you are going to be safe? When I'm interacting with you, do I trust that my boy is going to be safe? When I'm interacting with him, I think it gets to a point where the district may not really believe that those people will follow those social distancing rules, and that they don't want to risk those that are and are trying to be safe, that may be vulnerable of this virus, that may be trying to compete. And I don't think, there's a sense of accountability that students will be having as they're competing. I think that's a really big, dilemma and problem, that people really want to solve. But I don't think it's really something that you can really do as one person. I think it's definitely something you want to strive for, but I don't think it's something to risk right now.
Yeah, I like that. Everyone's not going to be as mature as you were as a high school student, as a student athlete. And then you always kind of want to say, if these coaches are going to be going the extra mile to make sure that these guys are safe as it relates to COVID, well, let's go back to the original topic you brought up. What about social justice? That's part of my conflict too. You see these coaches taking all these precautions, wearing masks and doing all this to save college or high school football. But where are these coaches at when it's time to discuss things like, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, all these type of things? And it's kind of like, I don't know, man. It's been cathartic for me to be able to have this discussion, but I really felt like I really haven't been able to share my true voice on this topic, man. And it's kind of like, maybe it's a lot when I look at, the terrible things I've been hearing on the news, the things that we saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And you may say, Lindsay, what does that have to do with football? But at the end of the day, it has to do with the enjoyment of your quality of life. So I think it's just as much as I love to watch, sports and be involved in sports in my capacity as a sports psychology consultant, working with great young men like you in whatever relationship as it relates to sports. The other part of it is, can I really enjoy sports if I have all these other things that are weighing on me too? Now, people often say what's great about sports as a spectator or as a participant, it's a way for you to get away. It's a way for you to get away from all those things. But it seems now that the things that you're trying to get away from have become intertwined with what you love so much. So now, who would have thought years ago it's always been said, keep politics out of sports. But right now, you look at the bubble, look at the leadership of LeBron James and the NBA, Black Lives Matter, being on the court, and there's actually going to be some statements, I believe, like end racism in the end zones in some NFL games. We'll see that tonight shortly when we see Chiefs take on the Texans. I just don't know, man. I'm just kind of tired, man. And I'm glad that I have a platform, great young brother like yourself. I can share this with people like Orlando Watkins, putting it out there, man. But, I guess what I have to come to a realization of right now, TJ, because normally this would be me smack dab in the middle of Michigan State's football season. I want to give a shout out to Coach Mel Tucker. I was just texting with him the other day. I'm excited to be out there supporting him and what's going on. But also, man, I'm just kind of like, do I need to just take a chill? And I don't mean, literally, but do I need to be okay with just being able to mentally detach from sports? Or how about this? You tell me what you think, Terry. To rearrange or redefine my relationship with sports at this time until we get through this moment.
Right. I like that. I like how you put that, kind of rethinking of how we watch sports during this pandemic and through social justice. But I love kind of a bit into the topic that, we were talking about bringing up today. During games, this weekend was the debut of college football, not the Power Five yet, but the debut of football itself, and the Group 5 teams are playing. A couple of games I want to point out, the Eastern Kentucky versus Marshall game. We see Eastern Kentucky coaches with shirts that say enough is enough. And during the game, they released a player's statement, which I just have notes about, just bringing it up. They said, today is about more than football.
Share some of that.
Yeah. So so I took little itty bits of, quotes from the statement that I felt, was worth sharing tonight. And one was, today is about more than football. It's about change starting here. We stand with the people across the United States to say enough is enough. This is about unity, not division. We hold ourselves to the highest standard and strive to be role models. So I think we're starting to see, where these players are like, look, we're playing, but we realize that we're African Americans, like a bit how we were talking about in the last couple of podcasts ago. But I think this is a key. We're seeing athletes use that platform, and just being able to use their voice and their perspective is key. Because like you said, these colleges are still making money, with them playing, and TV networks purchasing to be able to show these games, which is key to college making money. But we're starting to see them voice their opinions and letting people know. Because right now, people are killing themselves to watch any kind of sports. I've seen people watching these games, and I'm like, they probably wouldn't know a player on that team. But still, these players, knowing that, they're able to share what they feel and being able to have that spotlight for a minute. And so another game, the SF Austin versus UTEP game, Stephen F. Austin took a delay of game to honor, equality for all. So we're starting to see these different things be brought up in the game, and to kind of show their support. And I think these demonstrations go, without saying, to be very impactful, because we're seeing athletes, in the middle of being locked in the game, their mind is still on what's going on in the world, with being that escape, even though football may be their escape, they still realize that, look, this is my duty as an athlete to use my platform and speak out for those and speak out for myself. Because, we're still talking about athletes that are in their 20s, 18, 19, their early ages, that are vulnerable to these statistics that we see. A lot of statistics today say that, they're not supposed to live past 18, 25, we're supposed to be in jail, but we're seeing them be able to fulfill their dream and play college football. And so using that platform and being able to speak out, their coaches backing them up, wearing those shirts shows a lot, and I think more teams will follow through. Like you said, the NFL will have the end racism in the NFL. Hopefully, we'll see in about an hour tonight, from tonight. So I think it's really cool to see these players and see their coaches using their platform and to speak up, especially, you see these, white coaches backing up their African-American players. And I think that's very important to point out.
Speaking of that, I believe Coach Tom Harmon at Texas had a very powerful statement that had circulated for a while, but it was basically paraphrasing him saying, you cheer for these guys on Saturday. And, when the game is over, you clutch your purse, you run for them. Right. You love to say these guys can, be on the football team, but are you going to let them date your daughter? Are you going to hire him for a position in your company? I mean, he got right to the heart of it. So let me ask you this, Terry. Right. You're a bright guy. is it hypocritical of me to say I'm not big on seeing college football or sports right now, but I would love to see the social justice part in college sports and sports right now? It's kind of like I'm willing to watch it for the social justice part, but then, is that contradictory because I'm saying that still doesn't do anything about the health issue that's taking place?
I think if you go by book terms, by definition, Webster Dictionary, it would be. But I think, I think you hit it right on right on target. I think you're right on target with it. I think this is, if not now, then when? I think you asked that question. I think the last show, we got to do it now. I mean, all eyes on you. Everyone's begging to watch sports. And I think this is a perfect time to do it. And I think it's very key that we use this time. And I think just to go off the point where you said, like when we were saying coaches are speaking up, our guy Tom Crawford, his son Cody, was really big, and he released a statement with his dad on his podcast about, look, I'm having to go out and recruit these African-American athletes to come to my school, and their parents are trusting me to take care of them, and what does that mean if I'm not willing enough to view their perspective or hear them out or be open-minded? I mean, that says a lot, for a coach to sit down and really learn their players. Because, I mean, you see these teams are predominantly Black or people of color, so I think it's really cool to see these coaches. Because, look, I'm not going to go to a coach who's not willing to sit down and hear me out, even if it's being on a personal level, but let alone my skin color and learning about my struggle. So you're starting to see these coaches that realize that, look, for me to value them in their life and people that look like them in their life is very key, because I'm asking so much out of them. The most I can do is support them in times where they need it most, and they're speaking out. And you see Nick Saban, he's backing his players up on the march. He's receiving a lot of backlash, but he doesn't care. I mean, he's like, man, I'm recruiting these players to come here, and it's my job to protect them and make them young men. So who am I to just step back and like, oh, man, y'all got it. It's not my job to help y'all with this. But we're seeing them step up and be willing to help out his players that are voicing their opinions, and he's saying his, but he's like, supporting them, walking with them, and that says a lot, for a coach.
That point about Nick, I will say my thought is that he responded to the potential backlash because early on, coaches like him, John Calipari, who I'm a big fan of from the times I've come in contact with him, they were being called out as if they weren't doing enough. And I'm wondering, but I will still say that he was smart enough to be able to respond by taking some action. Shout out to Cody Crawford and Tom Crawford, of course, and Henrik and that whole family, great group of people, Andrea, their mom. Shout out to them. But to Cody's point, it's interesting because what I like about Cody and what he did is that it doesn't seem as if he's acting out of character. He seems that he recognized that he may have been sheltered as it relates to being around other people throughout sport. And I think he owned that. And I have nothing but respect for that. It's almost like, without getting off topic, Steve Nash, like, yeah, there is white privilege and privilege. It's like, once somebody say that, you're like, oh, okay, I can rock with it. He didn't try to deny it. But what Cody said is that, you're right. I got to go in here and be responsible for these guys. So that's unreason enough. Because basically he's saying, I don't really have a dog in this fight other than the fact that I'm trying to recruit these guys, which is reason I need to step up and do it. And, kind of going back to that whole contradiction thing, and maybe that's what I'm working through. It's kind of like, oh, it's not safe enough to play, but it's safe enough to march, which a lot of conservative or people on the other side of the argument can use that. But then you kind of touch on and say, well, if now, then when? I mean, it seems like the global pandemic has shifted people's hearts and minds. Because believe me, man, if there would be no George Floyd uprising if it wasn't for the pandemic. I don't care what you say. The pandemic put us all in a certain mindset, put us all in the idea of let's do something. It just really allowed us all to be very receptive. So I guess the therapy I'm experiencing right now by having this dialogue with you on this platform, and I thank you and Orlando for being a part of it, is I guess the bigger issue is maybe maybe I'm not so worried about sports because I'm worried about social justice. Maybe I'm not so much worried about are we going to play a game because I'm really bothered by the fact that a few white police officers in the state that I don't remember the name, but they were fired because they were recorded talking about how they want to kill black people with impunity. They said something to the form of effect, let's just start a race war and kill them several generations. And what bothered me, not that it was police officers, is that I'm like, well, don't just fire them. You need to go back and review every case they were involved in, because now we're talking about
Right.
systematic aspect. Even with the Breonna Taylor case, to my understanding, a police officer has been fired that's been involved with that. But we all know police officers who were fired for misconduct can simply leave and go to a different police department to get hired.
Right.
I guess, and I'm not always trying to be able to make comments to be able to appease the person I may be arguing with, and know that and we're not having an argument, but I'm saying people on the other side. But I guess the reason why I'm not so big on playing sports is because I'm still dealing with the overwhelming nature of all the social justice issues we have, if that makes sense. And I don't know if I'm trying to create an out for myself, but I'm really just trying to work through it because, man, it's like, I guess right now, man, sports aren't really that important to me right now. And I guess it's more so
it's valid,
quality of life. And that's health of COVID, but quality of life of you and I as black men in Orlando, as black men, as fathers, as husbands, as sons, as brothers, and those type of things. So I guess what some people are dealing with COVID may not be the same thing that we may be dealing with as a minority community. Because the one thing about COVID is all players want to play black, white, red, brown. But are all players committed to improving social justice? And I think there's a slight dichotomy. I know that was a mouthful. That was a lot. I don't know what you took from that or what you can take from that.
I love what you said at the end. I think, it's really key that I think I would say this pandemic with COVID-19 was a really big eye-opener. I think we see problems with healthcare. We see problems with social injustice. We see problems with school and resources. We see problems with, is the revenue over athletes' health and well-being, and I think it's a huge eye-openers, and it really challenges you to see your place in these kind of arguments. And I think it also challenges you to be open to the opposing argument, whether you believe that it's morally right or wrong. I think as we have these conversations, with COVID-19 and making sure everyone's safe, that should be everyone's number one, ideal right now. But it's not. A lot of it is sports first, and a lot of that has to do with making money or fulfilling their fans and their needs and wants, But I think it's really key that we have these conversations to see where we can go with them. I think a lot of times we just say, keep politics out of sports, but I don't think a lot of people realize the political side of sports. We're talking about money here. We're talking about athletes and their well-being. We're talking about their opportunities. They're not making money. So we're asking them to play in a pandemic where they're not making money. They're not being able to be rewarded. And I guess a lot of people say education is the reward. I get that. But when you got a corporation making billions of dollars, it's like, man, it's like you're asking me to risk my health, and y'all want to make billions and make money off these games. So I think it's making us think, where we stand. And I think we see a lot of people, more and more people speaking up and seeing where they stand. And so, as bad as 2020 has been, I think it's really caused this society in the U.S. to really think about, it's like uncovering a lot of scars that we tried to cover up, healthcare problems, education reform, and all these different things, and I think it's very key that we take these, uncover these scars up, because, we need to heal those wounds. We're talking about big things that go with, everyone's well-being, but now we're talking about on a different level of a specific category of people's well-being that we've been trying to cover we've been oppressed for 400 years. So I think it's really key that we bring these up.
I think to your point about, uncovering things, I think there's been a form of liberation that's taken place with a lot of people, myself included, during this time because,
Yes, sir.
the things that I would normally think about racism, now I'm probably more likely to talk about. And people who are on the receiving end or pick up on that may say, wow, where did that come from? I'm like, dude, it's been here the whole time. Just the climate did not
Yes,
allow
sir.
that because it was such a suppressed thing to talk about. So there's liberation in that, man. But I guess I'm just really all about fighting for quality life. I wonder, and I think I know the answer to this, but I think what I don't know is the percentage.
Right.
Maybe a smaller percentage, and what I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. There may be a small percentage out there now that we know of, but I think the percentage is much higher, and that is athletes and coaches who are seriously morally conflicted about going forward with sports right now.
Right.
There was an AD in the UP that resigned. He said, look, man, I'm looking at these numbers. I'm not comfortable with it. And, he resigned. And I think that's a small percentage of individuals being represented, but I wonder if it's really more. But if you are a Big Ten coach, if you are a D1 coach, if you think about this, if you're an NFL coach and they talking about we gonna play some football, and you're like, dude, I'm like high risk.
Right.
No, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to take it back home? And there's such an alpha male machismo that goes along with it because what they're trying to do, and you know about this as being an athlete as well, I think people are mixing your ability to be mentally tough with being morally aware. And it's like, man, it's not that I'm not mentally tough and I can't go out and play football. That's one thing. But I just don't, I'm bright enough to know that it's something out there. And I don't know. That's like telling me, hey, man, there's a lake out there in the middle of it. It's 300 feet deep. I want you to go all the way across. Well, there's going to be a part that this lake is going to be pretty dangerous. And I don't know. Do you think there are a lot of people do you think there are more people out there than we think who are very conflicted about going forward with the season, coaches and players included?
I believe so. I think we're at a point in time where any problem that comes across, I think there's always a majority and a minority. I think coaches that do have some kind of risk or at high risk, like Coach Popovich of the Spurs, he spoke on that and he was like, I'm not trying to get this, man. I mean, I get about playing, and he was really glad about their safety precautions. But back to what I was saying, so I mean, it's just really, it's to the point where those that speak out and that feel at risk, and don't want to be put in that situation and don't think it's a necessary need to play, I feel like their voices kind of get unheard a little bit. I think more so like the Big Ten maybe. I think you'll probably hear it a lot more just because of the Big Ten's platform. But I don't think they get as much favor because you hear people, get really offended when someone is saying right now, like, look, I don't think we should be playing. I don't think it's safe. And everyone's like, oh, you mean these fake numbers and all this other different stuff. And it's like, look, man, I mean, that's how I feel, and you can't, it's hard to judge someone by the way they feel because, I mean, every person has their own reasonings and their feelings. But I think they're put in that kind of situation where it's like they're kind of forced to just go with what's going. And I think maybe some coaches and some players may feel that way. And I think even more so the players, you hear Justin Fields and different players to speak out and like, look, we want to play Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, but you hear like the one guy from Michigan State, Jordan Reed, but I mean, I think it was Jordan Reed, I believe. I think that was his name.
Yes.
Yep. So I think, with him not opting out of the season, you're starting to hear more of it. But I don't think it's a sense of, I don't think it's very popular. I don't think people are really being too profound of that decision. And I don't quite blame them. I mean, every athlete has their choice and what they want to risk. And I don't think I don't think people should criticize them to the point, where, to the point where they don't think that they're doing the right thing or they're being lazy or they're not being grateful. And it's like, man, we're in a pandemic, that they want what's best for them. And I think every person has to eventually think about, is this in my best interest right now? Despite everyone else's feelings, I'm a person too. Like, I get that there's fans and people that want me to play and compete and win championships, and make the school money, but I'm a person too. And I think people forget that these athletes are humans. Like, they're like me and you. I mean, they all bleed red. They're human.
Right.
They have these same thoughts and doubts, but they're put to that, they're in these situations where it's like, can they even have feelings? You know, people think that they can't even have feelings. And I'm like, I don't blame them for not wanting to play, and I don't blame them for wanting to play, but it's just to the point where it's like, I don't want the sports world or these political people to, you know, backlash them because of how they feel and how they want to protect themselves. You know, as much as they're making these universities money, you know, that sometimes you got to think about, is this best for me?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, you used the example of Greg Popovich, excellent example. But if it wasn't Greg Popovich, if it was a local high school coach, would that get any traction? Would
Oh, no.
anyone care? Because it's Greg Popovich, people respect that. And I think there's no question that most of the athletes want to play, but the question is, what's the right thing to do? So in the interest of time and the fact that I want to be solution-based, what I want to kind of finalize and wrap up with is, what can we suggest to help people, Terry, who may be going through that, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, who may be conflicted, who may be, you know, really at a space where they're like, man, I don't even know if I should be playing right now. Social justice may may really strike close to home based on things that may have happened in their life. They may be distracted by all that that's going on. I just saw a video that happened in July of an unarmed black man being shot, and he died. And I remember I was watching it while I was on a Zoom, and naturally I made a crazy face. I was like, and people were like, what's wrong? What are you looking at? But it was my face. I was just so like blown away.
Right.
So I guess what I want to say to our viewers who are listening, because this is about mental toughness, and there's a lot of mentally tough things we got to work on right now. Not only just being a great athlete, which takes mental toughness itself, but being able to decide about, do you want to go forward, and being okay with being the only one that either wants to play or doesn't want to play, or being okay with supporting your teammates even if they have a different decision. So I think mental toughness plays a huge role, and it connects us right to mental health. So here's a question I ask as we get ready to wrap up, Terry. You've always given a great perspective. From a mental toughness and even a mental health standpoint, if you're a college player or a professional athlete or even a coach, and you have players on your teams who are conflicted about going forward and playing, whether it's because of COVID or social justice, what's the best way you can respond to them?
I would respond. I'm kind of thinking of it as like I'm a leader of a team, and I see a guy I know that's struggling about that. It's just my mindset right now. But
Yeah, that's
I
great.
think
Great.
I would just tell them, you know, you owe it to yourself to voice your opinion. I mean, we're put in they're put in these situations where, you know, if they don't want to play, if they don't want to play and their school wants to, like, oh, be quiet, be quiet. You know, we don't want to hear that. You know, and it's like, no, man. I mean, you owe it to yourself to say how you feel and to feel how you feel. You know, if that makes sense. You know, like these are feelings. You know, because of, you know, these situations. So feel them, you know, if you feel uncomfortable, talk about it, bring it up. Don't force people to cover up feelings. And that's the number one thing I hate. You know, it's just people who, you know, deflect feelings or don't want to talk about different things. You got to communicate. These are the times where, you know, I highly bet, you know, that other people feel that way. So I think if you're willing to come out, you know, those group of people come together. You're starting to see that, you know, with the Jordan Reed and other players that have been talking about revenue. And we're starting to see these players that come up and are starting to come together because they're voicing their opinion. So if you feel that way and you don't want to play, and you see players that feel like they should have played, you know, Justin Fields, and, you know, making, you know, making statements, you know, about how he wants to play and and having a petition, I believe, or something like that, you know, wanting to play, and their parents protesting. So really validate your feelings, come out, you know, say, this is how I feel, you know, and back it up. Say, why do you feel them? And I think it can kind of give you a sense of some closure, because it's like, man, I just let all that go. Thought I was going crazy. You know, everybody's telling me to be quiet and, you know, and hush, you know, and stop talking about that. But man, I just know the relief it'd feel, you know, to let those feelings go. Because, I mean, everyone deserves to have their feelings validated. And I think that's key for an athlete right now, where they're in a position where it's like, should I play? Should I sit out? I got to go back to my mom. I got to go back to my family. Some of them have children. I got to be there with my kid, you know, and they're asking me to step out of my kid's life for a minute. You know, like imagine if Xavier, Big X, you know, Xavier Tillman was asked to stay away from his, you know, his children for a minute, you know? And I think that's a big ask to do for a young father and his kid growing up. So, I mean, if these are these feelings, you know, that you're having, you know, talk about them, discuss them, you know, with your coach or friends, you know what I'm saying? And if they're not, and if these people around you are not trying to hear them, that gives you even more reason to speak out because somebody got to go, you know, because you should be there. Because you used to be there, man, to comfort your players. And I think it's key that they really validate their feelings and talk about them. This is the best time.
I like that. I like what you said about you're going to have to make a decision, and it could very well be the liberation that comes via COVID or the social justice issues we're dealing with right now is that you're forced to make a decision where in the past you probably didn't have to. And the good thing about making a decision is you can lie to anybody you want, but it's important to be truthful to yourself. And if you can make that decision, whether you want to play, whether you're good to go, whether you want to do more with social justice, here's an opportunity where everyone is forced to evolve to be able to take a stand and take a side. And I think at the end of the day, that's something that America is not really known for because you're known to kind of just fit in, but you're kind of forced to have to do that. So if anyone's at home struggling with the idea of having to make a choice that's not popular, having to make a decision that everyone won't be on board with, you have to understand that part of mental toughness and you having positive mental health is being able to make decisions that you're going to be able to live with. And I had to tell my daughter one time, you know, just be a little bit transparent. Her school is offered face-to-face, but I'm not letting her go back. And it's been a struggle because, you know, you talk about the social part and whatnot, but I had to explain to her, I said, you know, because right now she's the only student that's not back, and I'm okay with that. But I had to tell her, I said, honey, sometimes you are going to be the only one. You could be the only one if you won the race. You're the only one. You know what I'm saying? If you're the most successful person, you can end up being alone and being the only one. So I think it's important that we impart those life lessons. So with the time we have, man, we've been rocking for a nice little clip, man. I think it's been a great discussion. Terry, is there anything you want to add to summarize what we've talked about? Because it's really been helpful for me to say, you know what? Pick a side, take a stance, and be okay with that. And that's what I've gotten from this, and I hope that can be imparted to some of our listeners. But what are some things you would like to summarize and touch on as we prepare to wrap up?
Just real quick, I know that we made a lot of, you know, connections through sports, but I think for those that are listening, I think it's key that right now where you're making decisions to go back to work or make decisions to let your kid play or to let your kid go back to school, like for your example, make that decision that sits well with you. You know, I like to make decisions that sits well in my stomach. I don't like to make uneasy decisions. You know, my dad always taught me, you know, make decisions that you know you're gonna live with. Can you look in the mirror? You know, Coach Jones and you know, and all those my coaches in the past used to tell me like
Dave Jones,
like you gotta look in the mirror and be like, can I live with this decision I'm about to make? You know, can I look at myself in the mirror and be like, I'm proud of that decision. Like I'm good with that. You know what I'm saying? So I think
even if you're standing alone, even if it's the most unpopular decision. And I think that's important. Well, that's something great we can take from that. Well, with that, it's been a great discussion, Terry. You've been doing a great job. I look forward to these opportunities to discuss. I'm glad I can shoot you a text, you know, all hours of the day. You say, yeah, man, I'm ready. I'm on it. You do a great job.
Always.
Yeah, I want to also thank again Coach Orlando Watkins, who's doing a great job by just getting us connected and getting our message out to many people. And our hope is that it can help those. So with that, my name is Lindsey Huddleston with Sports Psychology Solutions, with my able-bodied co-host as well as the SPS intern for this pandemic fall, Mr. Terry T.J. McCord, and we got Coach Orlando Watkins, and we're going to say goodbye to you guys until next time. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next Thursday with the SPS Mental Toughness Show. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Coach.